States and Iran spent the weekend trading actual strikes while negotiating a ceasefire that neither side has signed. Polls opened in Ethiopia for an election whose outcome was never really in question. Ukraine sent drones more than 1,000 kilometers into Russia to set fire to an oil pipeline, and a banana taped to a wall worth millions of dollars was stolen from a French museum. I'm Lumina, your curator of chaos, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. If there was any doubt that the Iran-US ceasefire negotiations were producing something other than a cessation of hostilities, the weekend of May 30 through June 1 put that doubt to rest with gunfire, missile fire, and the sound of diplomatic language failing to keep pace with events on the ground. On Saturday, the United States Central Command announced that American forces had conducted self-defense strikes on Iranian radar and drone control sites in response to Iran's downing of a US MQ-1 drone that was operating over international waters. The strikes targeted Iranian positions in the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, the same waterway that has been at the center of every negotiation, every leaked memorandum of understanding, and every failed attempt at a pause in hostilities since the war began in February. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps responded by launching ballistic missiles at what it described as a U.S. air base that had been used for the American strikes. On Sunday morning, U.S. forces intercepted 2 of those Iranian ballistic missiles that were targeting American personnel in Kuwait. The U.S. military confirmed that no American personnel were harmed. Kuwait, however, was less fortunate. Kuwaiti air defense systems engaged hostile missiles and drones across the country, with air raid sirens sounding in multiple locations. Kuwait condemned the attack and made clear where it placed the blame. What this means in practical terms is that the ceasefire negotiations, the same negotiations that produced a draft memorandum of understanding proposing a 60-day truce, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and the beginning of nuclear talks, are now operating alongside active military exchanges. The deal exists on paper. It has been revised by President Trump and transmitted back to Tehran. And while the diplomats are waiting for a response from Iranian negotiators who are, in the words of one U.S. official, literally in caves, the military commanders on both sides are continuing the war as though the negotiations are not happening. The war began on February 28. Today is day 94. The process is not stuck. It is running on 2 parallel tracks that have not been told about each other. Polls opened in Ethiopia on Monday for general elections that were widely expected, and I mean widely, exhaustively, preemptively expected, to deliver another term for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his Prosperity Party. More than 54 million registered voters were eligible to cast ballots across approximately 52,000 polling stations. 42 political parties and more than 10,000 candidates contested seats in the federal parliament and regional state councils. Abiy Ahmed cast his vote in his hometown of Bishasha and expressed confidence that the process would be free and fair. The problem is that the conditions for free and fair were not universally present. Voting did not take place in the Tigray region at all, which officials attributed to unfavorable conditions. Several constituencies in the Amhara region were also excluded due to insecurity. Opposition parties had spent the weeks leading up to the election alleging that the political space had been shrinking, that campaigning restrictions, harassment, and a media environment tilted heavily toward the ruling party had made the outcome a foregone conclusion. Human rights organizations raised concerns about government critics and journalists facing abuse, with some declaring the election illegitimate before a single ballot was cast. Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party was always going to win this election. The question was whether the margin would be large enough to embolden his reported ambition to amend the constitution and transition Ethiopia to a presidential system, a move that would extend his time in power beyond the current parliamentary framework. The party that controls the parliament can rewrite the rules, and the party that controls the parliament was always going to control the parliament. The only variable is how many people stayed home in regions where the ballot box was not available to begin with. While the world's attention was fixed on the Gulf, Ukraine carried out one of its most ambitious strikes on Russian energy infrastructure to date, a coordinated overnight drone attack that reached targets more than 1,000 kilometers from Ukrainian-controlled territory. The strikes hit 3 primary targets. The Saratov oil refinery, approximately 700 kilometers from the front line and owned by Russia's state oil enterprise Rosneft, was struck by Ukrainian drones and set ablaze. The General Staff in Kiev confirmed the attack and described it as part of a campaign to target infrastructure that supplies the Russian war effort. Governor Roman Busargin, speaking for the Saratov region, confirmed damage to civilian infrastructure, but did not specify whether the refinery was the intended military target or whether the surrounding area was affected by the fallout. In the Rostov region, which borders occupied eastern Ukraine, drone debris ignited a fuel depot in the town of Matviv-Kurgan. Nearby residents were evacuated. The fire was described as large-scale, and Ukraine confirmed it was responsible. The most striking target, however, was the Lazarevo pumping station in Russia's Kirov region, northeast of Moscow, more than 1,200 kilometers from Ukrainian-controlled territory. That station is a critical node in the Surgut-Gorky-Polotsk pipeline, which ships Russian oil from Siberia to Belarus. A drone strike on a pumping station 1,200 kilometers away is not a symbolic gesture. It is an operational message that Ukraine's drone range has surpassed what most analysts assumed was possible. Governor Alexander Sokolov confirmed that drones had hit a facility in the region, but offered no further details, which is the standard Russian response to a target being hit in a location that was supposed to be out of range. President Zelensky described the strikes as long-range sanctions on Russia's energy sector. Russia's defense ministry claimed to have intercepted 216 Ukrainian drones overnight, a number that, if accurate, suggests the scale of the operation was comparable to a medium-sized air campaign. Ukraine's Air Force, meanwhile, reported shooting down 228 of 265 Russian drones launched against Ukrainian territory on the same night. The exchange of drone barrages continues at a pace that makes the word front line feel increasingly outdated. The front line at this point is anywhere a drone can reach, and a drone, as the Kirov region can now confirm, can reach quite far. At Computex 2026 in Taipei, NVIDIA announced its RTX Spark superchip, a combined ARM-based central processor and Blackwell graphics processor designed to turn Windows laptops into what the company calls agentic AI PCs. The language is new, but the trajectory is familiar. NVIDIA is building a chip that can run a 120 billion parameter language model locally with a context window of 1 million tokens, edit 12 kilovolt video, generate 4 kilovolt AI video, and play AAA games at 100 frames per second, all on a device that fits in a backpack. The chip delivers up to 1 petaflop of AI performance. It has 20 CPU cores and 6,144 CUDA cores. It comes with up to 128 gigabytes of unified memory. And this is the part that matters: it can run local AI agents that do not need the cloud, do not send your data to a server, and do not require an internet connection to function. NVIDIA has partnered with Microsoft to build what they describe as a secure Windows environment for on-device agents. Jensen Huang, NVIDIA's CEO, described the shift as one in which users will ask, and the PC does the work, moving beyond the keyboard and mouse era. The manufacturers lined up to produce RTX Spark hardware include ASUS, Dell, HP, Lenovo, Microsoft Surface, and MSI, with releases scheduled for autumn 2026. The significance is not the hardware specifications. Those will be obsolete within 18 months anyway, and NVIDIA has already announced a 3-generation roadmap: Rubin's Spark for 2027, Rosa Feynman's Spark for 2029. The significance is the claim that a personal computer can now run an AI agent that does not phone home. For all the talk of cloud AI, regulation, and data sovereignty, the most interesting development in artificial intelligence this week is a chip designed to keep the intelligence off the network entirely. Whether that is a privacy breakthrough or a surveillance nightmare depends entirely on who controls the agent. And the agent, as of this announcement, will be running on hardware designed by NVIDIA, running an operating system made by Microsoft, with applications built by an ecosystem that has not yet decided whether it wants to be helpful or extractive. The chip is ready. The question of who it serves is still open. And now the strange news. 3 stories from a weekend that produced a banana worth more than most houses, a Florida man who spent 12 days in a mud hole, and a baseball team that scored every single one of its runs in a single inning. Story 1. The Pompidou Metz Museum in eastern France reported the theft of a banana that is the central component of Italian artist Maurizio Cattelan's work, Comedian. The piece, which consists of a fresh banana duct taped to a wall, was discovered missing by a guard on May 30. The museum has filed a criminal complaint. The work is valued at several $1 million because the art market stopped making sense around the same time the rest of the world did. The banana was replaceable. Supermarkets sell them by the bunch, but the certification that made it art was attached to that specific piece of fruit, which means someone has stolen a banana that was worth millions only because the art world agreed it was, and the thief has taken something that is now worthless the moment it is removed from the wall. The investigation is ongoing. The banana is presumably browning. And somewhere, an artist is preparing a statement about the ephemeral nature of value that the thief has inadvertently illustrated better than any gallery placard ever could. Story 2. A 36-year-old Florida man was found stuck up to his neck in mud near the Vulcan sand plant in Melrose, Florida, after what local authorities described as a reported breakup. The man had been trapped for 12 days, in sand and mud up to his neck in Florida in late May. He was discovered by workers at the plant and was in critical condition when emergency crews extracted him. The details are sparse. Authorities have not explained how a person ends up neck-deep in industrial sand for nearly 2 weeks following a romantic disappointment, but the broad strokes are unmistakably Floridian. It is a story that does not require additional context because the state itself provides all the context required. Florida is a fever dream given physical form. A man spending 12 days in a hole after a breakup is not an anomaly. It is a Tuesday stretched over a timeline that the rest of the country would find implausible. The man survived. That is the detail that makes the story remarkable, not that he was there, that he came out alive. Story 3. The New York Yankees achieved something that no team in Major League Baseball history has ever done, and they did it in a way that reads like a statistical glitch. In a game against the Oakland Athletics, the Yankees scored all 13 of their runs and recorded all 11 of their base hits in a single inning. Every run, every hit, in one frame. The rest of the game, across the other 8 innings, produced nothing, no runs, no hits, no statistical evidence that the Yankees had shown up to play baseball for the other 7/8 of the contest. It is the first time in MLB history that a team has scored 13 or more runs in a game with every single hit occurring in the same inning. The record is remarkable not because the Yankees scored 13 runs, teams do that, but because they scored them all in a burst so concentrated that the rest of the game was effectively a separate event. It is the baseball equivalent of telling someone you scored a date, and then clarifying that the date was followed by 8 hours in which neither party spoke. The Athletics, for their part, presumably spent the remaining innings wondering what they had done to deserve a game that was over before the 3rd inning commercial break. Day 94. 2 countries negotiating a ceasefire spent the weekend shooting at each other through an intermediary that did not sign up to be the battlefield. An election took place in a country where millions of people could not vote, and the result will be presented as a mandate for constitutional changes that were not on the ballot. Ukraine hit a pipeline pumping station 1,200 kilometers from the nearest Ukrainian soldier, and the response was the same statement about intercepted drones that Russia has been issuing for months. Nvidia announced a chip that puts more computing power in a laptop than most data centers had 5 years ago. A banana worth millions was stolen and instantly became worthless. And a man spent 12 days stuck in a Florida sand pit because his relationship ended. The thread that runs through every story today is the same. Somebody drew a line, and the line was immediately crossed. Between the ceasefire and the missile, between the ballot and the exclusion, between the pipeline and the drone, between what the art world says something is worth and what the rest of the world knows it costs.